Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I have with me Prateek Pattanaik. I said that name correctly, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I went to Puri earlier this year for a Jyotisha program. And I was so excited because during the Jyotisha program one evening, we were told we were getting a concert. And it would be like, we would be learning the music of the local Odishian culture. But when Prateek came on the stage, I knew we were getting a lot more than just that. Because, Prateek he's although he appears very, very young, he's a very old soul. And he is not only a brilliant musician, but he's also a scholar and he's a cultural archivist. He's dedicated to preserving and reviving the spiritual and artistic heritage of Odisha in India. There's a very beautiful cultural movement that came out of the history of that area, and it's a wonderful part of Vedic philosophy, and I think more people need to know about it, which is why I have him here, and I'm very excited to have him. His work spans across documenting wisdom archived from ancient palm leaf manuscripts, sacred poetry, classical Odissi music, esoteric teachings of the Panchasakha, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Panchasakha tonight. A group of medieval saints and mystics, they help to shape a unique vision of inclusive devotional spirituality, which is rooted in the timeless Vedas. So I hope I got that correct. Did I miss anything, or is that...
No, that's perfect.
Okay. So Prateek, let's start with this. What inspired your engagement with Odishian spirituality and culture? Tell us a little bit about your spiritual path and how it led you to do what you're doing today.
Okay, we are told to be very secretive about it, but I'll just gloss over what I can.
Sure.
I began with music, that's very, very apparent. My family is very rooted in the Jagannath culture, which is of course universal in our state. There is no escaping the great tradition of the Jagannath temple of Puri. The good thing is it percolates down to the grassroots. So it's not something that's just in the center or in the coastal areas. Even, for example, I come from southern Odisha, from a district called Koraput, which is known for significant tribal population and has some of the earliest tribes of India. So it has the Bonda tribe. Even in those tribal communities, you find deep reverence for the deities. And it is a very different kind of reverence than the reverence that you find among, say, Vedic scholars. Of course, if you know the history or the legend of the establishment of the Jagannatha temple and how the deity came to be consecrated there, the story of Nila Madhava and Lalita, you will know that there is a significant role given to the tribal community even in the legend, which is being narrated by the Brahmin narrator. So it's a very inclusive sort of thing that way. And in our family, we have the culture of singing of especially the Odia Puranas. So the Bhagavata Purana written by Atipati Jagannatha Dasa, the Dandi Ramayana written by Balarama Dasa Gosai. So these are all seers of the Panchasakha, which we'll be talking about. And that singing tradition is one of the branches, say, of Odissi classical music. My grandmother was initiated into that music by her guru, and so I began learning from her at a very young age. And she is also a teacher of Odia literature, so she began teaching me the literature and the music side by side, and somewhere the music led me to it. And of course, one of the early seeds is that, as any kid in Odisha will tell you, the grandfather tells you stories of Jagannath when you sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my grandfather was greatly associated with the Jagannath temple of Koraput, my maternal grandfather, that is. So both of them played a significant role in inculcating this tradition. So, and we see the music as a kind of service to the deities. Even now that sense is preserved because this is the music that was offered to the deity when he would sleep. So Jagannatha sleeps to the music of Jayadeva's Gita Govinda, which is a 12th century poem. And this is the music tradition that comes from the tradition. So the music in its entirety is meant as a specific kind of music, which has been the cream of the Odishan philosophical system. So we look upon the music as a what do I say, an oral expression of the philosophy that backs it, rather than just seeing it as something, as an instrument to exhibit your prowess. No, not something like that. So that we are very conscious about. And the more you sing, and the more I began learning the veena after that from my guru Pandit Ramarao Patra. And the veena is a very mystical kind of instrument. So it began, what do I say, unknotting the knots, opening up the layers, things like that.
Wonderful. That's beautiful. So you grew up from a very young age inculcated in that tradition, and the music itself is a path of spirituality. And when I think about it too, my exposure to this tradition was primarily through the teachings of Jyotish. So I came from a Western background. I was a French Catholic growing up in a rural area in Quebec. And, I always had a deep connection to Eastern philosophy. It resonated somehow a little bit more than what I was taught and brought up with. And so when I learned about yoga and meditation, this sort of opened up whole vistas for me. But eventually, when I discovered Jyotish, and then I was led to these teachings, this was sort of the doorway to the Panchasakha. And I think it's important because some of my classmates that were all studying together, we tend to only focus the Panchasakha more with like Achyutananda and the side of Jyotish, but it's so much more than this. This is one of the things that I began to learn when in my time in Puri.
They've influenced almost every sphere of thought.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later, of course.
Yeah, maybe now we can talk a little bit about the Panchasakha and who they were, just so people understand what it is we're talking about, maybe a little bit of the history behind that.
Yep. So the Jagannatha temple is, of course, an institution dating back millennia. So it has its own way of thinking, of philosophy. That philosophy has been codified by different scholars over different periods of time. But in the late 15th century to the early 16th century, so somewhere in the 1400s, 1500s, you find this group of 5 seers coming together and calling themselves the Panchasakha, 5 friends. So, and they seem to be propounding the same philosophy. Now, modern historians have disputed the existence of the 5 seers together and whether it is not added upon later. But as you know, in India, everything keeps increasing in size. It's like the Mahabharata. Na? Things were always appended to it. You can't say this is only the Mahabharata. You can't reject the parts that come later. Similarly, the Panchasakha concept has very much been a concept for at least the last 300-350 years. So from a very traditional point of view, it's believed that they were contemporaries and coexisted, and the dating has also been done according to that. Now their works do not talk about it directly, but they talk about it in clues, which was the practice back then. This is again another of the core practices. They wrote a lot of literature. Literature back then was meant to be transmitted through song, because all classes of people did not have easy access to manuscripts because they costed a lot to commission manuscripts. So the voice was the primary medium, and they took upon themselves the task of democratizing the knowledge. So for example, Atibadi Jagannatha Dasa translates the Samskrita Bhagavatam into Odia, so that the Bhagavata can be understood by everybody. Which, if you look at the 1500s, is a very odd thing to do, because the Samskrita Bhagavatam was believed to be the word of God in a way. So you were not supposed to translate it. Krupa Siddha Balarama Dasa Gosai, the senior most of the Panchasakha, translates the Ramayana. Mahapurusha Achyutananda Dasa translates the Harivangsha. So, and they also translate several other texts, because each of them has several dozens of texts to their writing, all written in musical meter with ragas indicated. And that's how, and they write for different classes of society. So Achyuta Mahapurusha writes as in he documents the legends that are in circulation among the cowherd community, among the potters community, and thereby legitimizing them with a backstory. So he doesn't need to do that, but he writes them and he gives it the title of Purana. He says Kurala Purana, the Purana of the potters. So things like that. We see a very, very open-minded movement that doesn't, is not too concerned with caste or creed or things like that. Is more concerned about documenting the practices of yore and transmitting them to the present generation in a very, very simple manner, with removing the role of the middleman, removing the necessity to be a master of Sanskritam, and that way. So it's generally an open to everybody, and it's not like they have morphed the practices or morphed the sanctity of the old practices. They're very much conscious about who is entitled to do what. They've just made clear the various pathways that already existed within the tradition and said, see, these are the ways, you choose what you want. That's basically the approach of all five of them. You find a very cohesive thing, primarily because they're not inventing a new methodology. They are just collecting what has been reduced over time, and more so because the Utkaliya philosophy or way of thinking is in itself a very secretive line of thought. So before they wrote, even that much was not available. And after they wrote, their texts were in very, very limited circulation until the 1850s, when print media made everything very accessible. So I wouldn't be entitled to talk about this even 200 years ago. It was a closely guarded secret because it came from the Tantric heritage of Odisha.
Okay. But it's still that it's still a lot. Okay, so my understanding as well, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they emphasized a very holistic approach to spirituality. I remember you describing in India during your presentation as they would imbibe all different facets of spirituality, and it wouldn't be like they're discounting one school and embracing another. It's more like they're synthesizing or integrating all aspects of spirituality.
Yep, I'll phrase it in a different way. Okay. Rather than say synthesizing essentially denotes that there are divided sects that you assimilate. Whereas the old way of thinking has always been, there are different ways for different people. It's like Krishna says in the Gita, there are these three ways, you choose what you want according to your temperament. So before sectarianism became a significant part of Hinduism, so before you have this separate school of Vaishnavism, 4 sampradayas of Vaishnavism, before that you also have a Vaishnavism which recognizes Vishnu as another expression of the sole Param Brahma. Odisha is somewhat stuck in that era, where you recognize the essential oneness of the Panchadevata, but you still say, I like this manifestation of the deity. So the Panchasakhas are Vaishnavas in their approach. In all of their texts, you'll find a leaning towards Vishnu. But that leaning towards Vishnu doesn't come in latter sectarianism. You find a very different kind. You find Vaishnavas undermining the other sampradayas. And not just Vaishnavas, you find the same phenomenon for all the sampradayas. And this is also prescribed to view your Ishta as the primary manifestation and all the others as subsidiary manifestations of the divine. But in the Panchasakha thing, you find great respect for all the traditions. You do not find a rejection of Shakti just because you're a Vaishnava. And that understanding essentially comes because of the Chaturdha Murti in Puri. Because Balabhadra is traditionally seen as Shiva or Rudra, Subhadra is seen as Shakti, and Jagannatha is seen as Vishnu. So, and they're all on the same pedestal, same Singhasana. So it is all the essential oneness, and there are 3 different aspects of the same divine. So that understanding is maintained in the texts of the Panchasakha. And you find them proclaiming other deities very openly, which is not very common for a Vishnu devotee. I'll talk about the legends later, you'll see. Because again, if you read the Sridhari Tika of the Bhagavata, which is the most famous commentary on the Srimad Bhagavata, Sridhar Swami being from Odisha, right from the beginning, he begins talking about the essential oneness of Shiva and Vishnu. He says, I bow down to Shiva and Vishnu who delight in each other's stories. Paraspara Atmano, Paraspara Nati Priyo. I bow down to them who are fond of bowing down to each other.
Beautiful.
Yep. So I was talking that day also. No? So Vaishnava will say, I'm grateful to Shiva for having exposed me to the greatness of Vishnu. And Shiva is pleased because you're singing the tales of Vishnu. So it comes from that kind of a thinking rather than taking everything and mashing it together,
Okay.
It's an older form.
Right. Well, thank you for adjusting that comment. And you had alluded to this earlier, but the teachings of the Panchasakha were primarily transmitted through music. That is a correct statement, yes?
Yep.
Right.
Because manuscripts were too expensive. So when Achyutananda Mahapurusha writes 30 texts, say, you as a lay practitioner might not have the means required to copy all 30. Even if you do, they were closely guarded, so it's not easy to get the texts anyhow. And the Guru will only tell you the text that you need to know.
Correct.
So Achyuta Mahapurusha prescribes some 32 dozen kinds of sadhanas. So of course it's not possible for you to do all 30, nor is it required. You can just do what you want and what you can do within your way of functioning. So that was all. So therefore the primary exposure would be from the mouth of the Guru, and then they would sing, because there was no concept of prose recitation in those days. Everything written is meant to be sung, and prose was hardly 10% of, say, ancient literature of the Odia language. Similarly for all, it's like in Sanskrit, no? Everything is meant to be recited or sung. This is even more musical. In Odia, it's even more melodic that way.
It's very beautiful. And I mean, even some of the examples that you provided for us when we were there, and I believe that at some point I'll have the link. I'll be able to share portions of that recording. I don't know if it would be too much for me to put you on the spot and ask you for like an example for purposes of our discussion.
Of the music?
Yeah.
Okay. So should I sing from the writings of the Panchasakha or generally?
Whatever you feel is appropriate.
Okay. Let me find a text that resembles this.
Yeah.
Okay. I should sing from the Ashtagujjari of Achyutananda Mahapurusha. So he's written 8 songs, 8 short songs called the Ashtagujjari, which are it's like the final word for everything in his sampradaya. So he's written a lot. He's written the most of all 5, and this is the cream of his own churning. Bhava vinodiya ঠাকুর ভক্ত বৎসল হরি ভকত লাগি কলে বর দশ মূরতি ধরি ভক্ত তো হর কি করিব ভক্ত বলরে থাও ভক্ত পেশিলা হস্তিনাকু দূতপণরে যাও পাণ্ডবଙ୍କୁ তুমে রখিল কিস কলাকৃপতি তুমহর খন্তাকু বিপতি দেবা কাশকতি and the signature line ভক্ত দেখাইলা থম্বকু भृत्यर भृत्य परिभृत्य भने दीन अच्युत. So my voice is a bit low because it's early in the morning.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. And the thing is that I want the listeners to realize that as beautiful as it sounds, the melody, it's not really about the performance aspect. It's more about connecting with the divine directly through the bhakti, through purity. That's right?
That's the purpose of all art, no? All art becomes sattvika in its nature, then it becomes less about. But of course, you need command, that's sure, because the way we look at it is these art forms are all meant as a service to Jagannatha. So, of course, you offer what is the best. Therefore, you polish it so that you are able to offer. It's like you get the finest muslin to offer to the divine, and that's basically an important element of the worship of Vishnu. He delights in all the best, the choicest of material. So you take up a lot of pain to master the form, master the technicalities, only to give them up later. That is the pedagogy of all the traditional forms of our state. That's because if you don't do that, it will become scrambled. There needs to be shrinkala, no? There needs to be something that binds it together, because that is what is Shastra. Unless you do that, it is not Shastraik. If it's not Shastraik, it's not fit for worship. It's like you purify the upacharas before offering them to the deity. It's like that. So you purify, get the best cream, and then you offer it, but without the pretense of having achieved great mastery, or without the intention to showcase your mastery. If it comes in the flow, then fine. If it's and also when we sing the songs of the Panchasakha, we have other songs which are meant to be more demonstrating the melodic form as expositions of the raga or the tala or things like that, because that is a component of any kind of classical music. But even in those kinds of songs, there comes a flow state when you forget that and it just flows seamlessly. So that is the target state for all classical musicians. When you don't think about it, yet it comes out of you. Same for Pattachitra, same for any kind of the traditional textile forms, same for cooking. If you go to the Puri temple, they have a very specific proportion for cooking each item. You can't exceed it. But then you see the chefs at work, they don't think about the proportion all the time. They are masters of, they'll just throw anything and it will be the perfect proportion. But they've learned it at the beginning.
Right. I think the same could be said for Jyotish as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it is a shastric practice, and it's very easy, and especially as a Western student approaching it, we tend to sometimes approach it solely as a cerebral exercise, and we might forget the intention behind it, right? As an offering to Jagannath, as you say, like it can be so beautiful.
We also do that because in the beginning, if you don't do that cerebral thing, then it just won't seep in.
Yeah. It's true. We have to put in the effort, and it has to transcend the head and eventually settle into the heart, I think.
If you study how the Vedas were taught, it's an oral tradition, right? So there are a variety of techniques to ensure that the tune doesn't change, because the tune is believed to be handed down from the gods. It's not man-made. So there are a variety of hand techniques. They'll count the swara. The children are taught to wave their hand up and down so that the tune goes in sync with the pitch variations. And there also you see the same thing. The students just memorize the sound of it first. It's much, much later that they're told this is the meaning of it. So essentially all kinds of teaching in India that can be considered a great, great ancestor to all our pedagogy.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. talking a little bit more about the influence of the Panchasakha and their teachings, how would you say that it has shaped, modern Odishan culture?
Of course, the disrespectful attitude towards disrespectful or not too obsessed with caste and other kinds of social hierarchy or divisions, primarily not considering it to exclude somebody from the path of the divine. They don't exclude somebody from the spiritual path, or don't say you're not entitled to listen to the Bhagavata just because you do not belong to this community. Things like that were disregarded by them. So they believed that you could transcend solely by listening to or by indulging in the deeds of Hari or Vishnu. This is the same kind of approach you find in the Odia Bhagavata, for say. So even now, in every village of Odisha, you will have a hut in the middle of the village, which is called a Bhagavata Tungi, where on top of a Vyasasana, or you have that book holder, manuscript holder, on top of that you will find a palm leaf manuscript of the Odia Bhagavata by Atibadi Jagannatha Dasa kept. Every evening there will be a Purana Panda, so a Brahmin who specializes in singing the Puranas. So they are taught to recite or not recite, sing the Bhagavata in traditional modes like Namai Nrusingha Charana Onadi Parama Karana Jahara Adi Madhyanta Bichare Nagate Jagata. So they will sing like this, and they have a fixed repetitive phrase after every few, which is Govinda, 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 Padugodu Chimakaranda, Semakaranda, Panakari, Hele Torile Brajanari, Se Brajanari Kapayare, Manamo Rahu Nirantare, Manamo Nirantare Rahu, Ha Krishna Boli Jiva Jau. So they would have, so this is all in a proper raga. But it's not too overwhelming, no? They've constructed it to just feed you the essential quality of the raga, which is what in classical music we'll call the dharana. So the seed of the raga is fetched and served for you without it being too much of an intellectual exercise for you, because we can do significant intellectual exercise in this too. But if I do that, then the essence of the teaching is lost. So the music is again meant as a carrier rather than the showpiece itself. But the carrier is also according to the rules of the Shastra, and they will switch tunes because it gets boring. No, you can't sing the entire text in the single tune. So there is a tune of the Odia Bhagavata in every raga of Odissi music, every raga and every tala. So there's every melodic structure and every rhythmic structure, there is a tune of the Odia Bhagavata. So for example, they would change after some time. Govinda, 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 Padugodu Chimakaranda, Semakaranda, Panakari, Hele Torile, Brajanari, Se Brajanarinka Payare Manamo Rahu Nirantare, Manamo Nirantare Rahu, Ha Krishna Boli Jiva Jau, Ha Krishna Boli Jau Jiva, Mote Uddhara Vasudeva. So they would sing like that. Now this
So
refrain is
wonderful.
where everybody could join. So there are recurring lines that are repeated every 2 dozen lines, say. So you listen to the story, and after say 10, 12 lines, this Govinda, Govinda, Govinda will come again. So it's
Right.
essentially an anchor to let the crowd join in. Look at the structuring of the thing. It's so beautifully framed so that you can also join in the singing. Because there's this fixed set of phrases. So you listen to what the Bhagavata is essentially the tale of Vishnu. So the exploits of Vishnu and how he's born in Mathura, how he is born Gopa, and
It's
how he goes together. So that's the whole story.
that's such a beautiful practice. And
So this
I
is how it's structured. So in every village, the Purana Panda will read, and the whole village, the farmer will return from his work, the ironsmith, the blacksmith will return from his work, because in the evenings they didn't have work. And everybody will sit together and listen to the Bhagavata. So
hmm,
this is how they've influenced culture, Odia culture at a very grassroots level. And through these teachings, they'll again teach the same thing. No, the only thing is Hari, focus on Hari, don't focus on all these social, worldly divisions. And you don't need to be too ritualistic. You have God within you. Focus on your breath. Listen to the sound within. These are the common metaphors or symbolic language that they will use. And this also comes from a much older tradition. This is called Sandhya Bhasa, found in the Charjapada, which are the earliest songs in Proto-Odia or Odia, an early form of Odia, in the 7th, 9th, even the 5th century, some songs. So those songs are among the earliest literary compositions found in the Odia language. And they also reveal the same kind of mentality because they also come from a shared tantric heritage. So Tantra mandates that you cannot speak about secretive practices openly, because then the practices will be misused for miracles or for mundane purposes, which is not what you want. So you express it in a codified form, and you use fixed metaphors. So the metaphors are not random. There's a conventional metaphor that are being used again and again, but which doesn't make sense for a lay listener. So that's
hmm,
how they would design.
okay.
This is how they've managed to reach every class of the Odia society. And they're essentially reinforcing the same tradition that has been 1,000 years or 2,000 years before them. So they've ensured that this delicate social structure doesn't collapse under the influence of invasions, and then you have foreign rule, and you have specific parties that are cooperating with the rulers and all that. It's very easy for a structure like this to collapse if there's not something to keep reinforcing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I think the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit more was, your role, or at least your seva, what you're doing. You're collecting and preserving a lot of these manuscripts and a lot of the leaf manuscripts and some of the music as well. I'm wondering if you could share some insights into some of the challenges and the potential rewards from this endeavor that you've received, particularly in the context of safeguarding Odishian spiritual literature.
Yeah. So I've always been looking for new songs. No, when I was new songs, as in old songs that have become very very rare. So I always wanted to have this huge hoard of songs that I could, because it was just you can say spiritually uplifting to listen to the songs. So collecting songs, it was like not as a trinket, but more as a medium that can help people transcend. So these are the compositions themselves. So when a musician of the 17th or the 18th century or older than that used to compose in Odisha, they would not only take care of the technical structure of the form, the indigenous form, but they would also take care to preserve this philosophical base, which is something you can listen to in the song. It comes off as something more than just the external structure of the song. So when you look at that, then it becomes, even the external structure is important for that matter. In our philosophy, even the external is not something to be discarded. It is also something to be enjoyed. Because again, I was talking about Tantra, no? This is very in line with Tantra, which celebrates the body as also a manifestation of the divine, because the body is itself a gift from. So that's how they look upon it. They don't reject the body, which is something from the ascetic traditions. You would expect ascetic traditions to completely undermine the body. Whereas this tradition says don't undermine the body, or don't think of the body as everything. So a very neutral outlook to everything that happens. So because I knew that it had to have something more than that, and also the outer expression is also important because it codifies the philosophy. The way Odissi music is structured, and the way the finer nuances, the trills and the embellishments that come here and there, the structure of the ragas, the structure of the taras, essentially has to have a backing in the same philosophy. So even the outer core becomes very, very important, and that's what, after years of learning, that's what we realize. We realize that our gurus don't indulge in this showmanship because they are in philosophy has been inculcated in them. So, and the flashy display of say lightning fast singing is viewed in conservative Odishian traditions as something to be as a marker of lower spiritual index. So so our gurus will usually say it's a very Rajasika singing. Rajas, na? So this is very Rajasika singing. This is not the point of the song. The composer did not intend. So how they would distill it to its core form, and how the songs themselves are structured, therefore becomes a matter of great interest to me, both as a musician and both as a follower of this line of spirituality through the path of music. So therefore I would go to these villages, talk with elderly gurus, because I felt there's something in the village that is missing in the city. Something in the singing of the 85-year, 95-year-old gurus. Their voice just had a different kind of throw. It is now that I realize that throw was because, or the texture in their voice was because they had learned in this methodology from when they were children. So in the 1930s or 40s, the gurus back then were very, very conscious that you have to go this way, or they would simply not teach. They would say, we will not teach. So the natural question is, if you don't teach, this is also why several songs become either extinct or endangered. Because gurus back then were very, very protective of the songs themselves. They would say it is better for the song to die or go extinct than teach the song to somebody who doesn't understand the spiritual component in it. So here you look up, here you find the internal philosophy is more important than the external. Of course, the external is not to be disregarded, but it is essentially the core that is of our concern. The external is just a medium of expression. And the medium of expression has to be preserved because that is the gateway for the future generations to the philosophy. Philosophy is something very abstract. No, you can't just make somebody sit and just begin your discourse. You'll have to get them exposed to the visual culture, to the oral culture, or something or the other. It's like the food in the Puri temple is crafted to elevate your spiritual index. So you can't say just disregard the food, because the food is essential. So these are all mediums to open up the chakras. In that sense, it comes from the yogic heritage, that the Panchasakha. Therefore, you find a great deal of yogic learning in the Panchasakha Sampradaya. Something that is, you will find other lines of thought in India where yoga is disregarded. Or say in very bhakti traditions, yoga might be looked upon as something that is very physical or sthula. And it's not wrong if you say that without a elevated spiritual index, if you indulge in sheer physical yoga, it's of no use. Of course, hatha yoga is that's a popular criticism for Hatha Yoga. So you might indulge in all these asanas without any development. So that is also scorned upon. But yoga is again, it's a method of purifying the body in the Panchasakha tradition. So you not just purify the mind, but also purify the body so that the body refrains from. So if the body is clean, it doesn't ruin the mind further. It allows the mind to stay in a stable state. So the whole thing is to, again, they'll say balancing the male and the female elements. Again, Tantra at play. The concept of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, again, the yoga, Ida, Pingala, Sushumna, that all that comes here. That's how they extend the philosophy. And that is why I began going to the villages and collecting the songs. Essentially, my concern was nobody is collecting these songs, it will die down. And thankfully, and I have been tested in various villages. So 9,500-year-old gurus will not teach you the song unless they know that this fellow is a proper fellow and is not just here for publicity.
Right.
So they've asked me on many occasions, do you know that raga? They'll sing something, tell me which raga this is. And so some esoteric thing they'll sing that nobody would have listened to. Can you guess? I would guess something around the corner and only then they will approve and then they will teach. So I have a guru who is now 106 years old.
Wow.
Exactly the same method. When I first met him, he sang something and said, can you know which raga this is? So that kind of extempore testing, and you see that kind of testing also comes again from this tradition. Again from this philosophical tradition to test and give the knowledge. And that's how I began manuscripts for the same purpose. So I could find songs from the poet's pen that had died down so that I have the manuscript and now I can go to the village and say, do you know this song? So I've done all of that and soon I began finding manuscripts of other things as well, like those of the Panchasakha. Now if I have a manuscript, so I better digitize it or do something with it. Because I know even this manuscript will be ruined if I don't. And the problem is, even though there are significant institutions to take care of palm leaf manuscripts in our state, the production of these manuscripts was on such a large scale that the efforts done until now are simply not sufficient. There could be more efforts. There are several areas of Odisha from where palm leaf manuscript collection has not been done. There are several kind of lineages which will not let you into the knowledge unless you are initiated in that form. Like the music thing I said, no, the music guru will not tell you that song unless you have learned music already for some 10 years.
So my thought, and it's sort of a twofold thought, and I'm not sure if it's a question so much as a statement, and perhaps there's a question in there somehow. But we were talking about how gurus are very careful about sharing their teachings with students that are deserving. And, you know, what we're seeing with, at least my observation as an outsider traveling in India, is that there's a lot of an adoption of material mindset, and particularly amongst young people, maybe less so in Odisha, but in other parts of India, certainly. So would you say that cultural aspect is in decline and that there is a risk of perhaps losing some of the essence?
No, that's the situation everywhere in India, sadly. Everywhere in the world, if you think of it that way. Because these traditions have become more and more commodified and it's become more of a material thing for most artists. And for those that even, see, in the earlier generation, there were always these 70, 80-year-old figures who would guard over the form to ensure this kind of a thing did not happen. Now it has become more or less an individual thing. Each one survives on their own. You can't fault them for it. So you can't expect the 15th century or even the early 20th century level of spiritual index that used to exist in present times. So simply because it's just become too object oriented. And there's no way out of it. There are a few people who preserve the old mold, but that's about it.
Yeah. The other side of this coin is that, and particularly as an outsider, as someone who, is obviously Gora like myself. Uh, you know, for me, this side of spirituality is everything. But I realize I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm approaching it as an outsider as well. And in certain cases, it's considered to be, closed practice. Although the Panchasakha have definitely, shown their influence that it can be open for all walks and creeds. I'm sort of wondering what we can do. Like maybe you might have some wisdom to sort of guide the Western mindset who might be in a similar situation to myself, where we want to learn more, we want to understand more, and perhaps even practice more, but we want to be very respectful of the culture. Like what steps or measures can we take to sort of help preserve that the sanctity of that culture? And I'm not sure exactly how the question. I think you understand where I'm going.
I don't think it's very different from how careful we are. Because if you ask me, see, this traditional music or Odissi music, traditional painting or pattachitra, and all other traditional stone carving of Odisha, traditional wood carving, and all these forms that come together. As from being from the artistic traditions, we look at them just as different sadhanas. And of course, you're advised to not indulge in more than one because you can't handle it. So each will take you to the same goal, but it's essentially you should know your limits of being confined in the form. Otherwise, the thing is, your energy gets scattered across too many forms and you don't reach this layer of understanding in either of the forms. So when you don't reach that level of understanding, the form itself gets reduced to a very material thing. Instead of understanding the underlying aesthetic form, and that the aesthetic form is itself an expression of the philosophical form, you get too stuck up on the external expression of the rudimentary things. Even that goes wrong because you lack understanding of the aesthetic form. So even if you're not too concerned about the spiritual thing, as many people are in today's times, you can't expect everybody to be into this spiritual kind of thing. So even the aesthetic form requires appreciation and respect towards the spiritual heritage that the form itself possesses. And isolating the form from that and appreciating it, which has been done in the last, say from the 1980s to the 2000s. If you look specifically at the performing arts, there have been several studies that isolate the form from this heritage and just look upon it as a very scientific, technical kind of thing that is appreciated. That kind of study has come from within the tradition also, but again with respect towards the heritage. So that's the major thing. I don't think I'm any more qualified than you to, or more entitled to access this repository of knowledge. Ultimately, you will have to go to a guru who specializes in just the philosophy, because the philosophy is the core of it. And that will be the kind of gurus that you see, the mahantas of the various mathas and that kind of a thing. Those who indulge in just the darshana side and just the sheer sadhana side and specialize in multiple sadhanas, there are people like that. And these Panchasakhas are themselves people like that, who specialize in the core philosophy and then use these myriad expressions. So you'll have to go to a guru of that sort for guidance. That's all. But and again, here I have to be respectful of that heritage also, because I'm not accessing the philosophy in its raw form as they are. Achyutananda Mahapurusha in his texts will give you the direct sadhana. He will say, all the Panchasakhas will say, listen to the sound within. So that as a musician becomes of great interest to me. Listen to the unstruck sound, because every sound in the world is produced by vibration or striking of objects. No? So they'll say, listen to the anahata sound. And even in our music, the gurus would, after a point of time, when they see the shishya is dedicated enough, they will give the mantras, bija mantras, and the swaras themselves are the bija mantras. This is something I don't know of in the other traditions. This is something very, very unique to the Odishan tradition. And then they will say the chakras will open up. So the gurus of that time would use the veena as an instrument to channelize the energies so that the chakras could be opened up. This sounds like mambo jumbo this will sound like mambo jumbo to most musicians of today. But the gurus of that time would think that singing will open up this chakra naturally. The Vishuddhi chakra will be opened if you keep singing, and it will purify this chakra. So these are essentially tools to purify the chakras. So that is from a very Panchasakha point of view. And any guru after 20 years of training in your would expose only the deserving 2-3 disciples to this kind of knowledge. So I feel quite grateful to just be exposed to that side of things within the tradition of music. I don't think I'm entitled to access even the pure philosophical tradition. That's entirely something else. So the best we can do is just read the texts. That is the greatest privilege of our generation. But again, don't interpret the texts until you have gone to a guru, but you can just read the text. There will be layers that are more accessible because the Panchasakha themselves are very aware of that. They are very aware of the fact that among the people we are addressing, there are people who are initiated, there are people who know nothing, there are people who don't want to be initiated or simply don't have the time to be initiated. So if you're a regular worker who has to slog every day just to eat, I can't bother you with facts of sitting and doing Kundalini sadhana because you don't have the time for that. So they will feed, and Achyuta Mahapurusha writes for that matter. He says, if you can't do this, do this. If you can't do that, do that. So he's very clear about that. So the best we can do is just read the literature, and better than read is to listen, because that's the traditional method. If you can just listen to authentic singing of the texts themselves, and then take away what you can, take away the layers that you feel are simple enough and that you think are not being misread by you or don't have much potential. Just like things in the Bhagavata. This is the tale of Krishna. Krishna goes there, does this, does that. So there's not much scope for misunderstanding. You might miss on deeper layers, but you always have the commentaries to guide you. So traditionally you would do that. You would begin with reading the Odia Bhagavata. Any old scholar will tell you, because that is the simplest form of expression. And the texts of Achyuta Mahapurusha's repertoire, such as the Sunya Sangita or things like that, are of a very higher level. So they will primarily gloss over this, do this sadhana, use the japamala in this way, this chakra will open up if you do this. So they are very advanced sadhanas. That's not where you begin from. You begin from the Bhagavata and the Ramayana, and the logic is that just by listening to this, it will elevate your index so that you can be a good receptor for the future higher levels. That was the tradition. And even if you don't reach the higher levels, it's not a problem, because they will just say, do nama, just chant the names. That's why you are given the mantra in the first place. They are nama mantras, no? The Hare Rama Krishna, those mantras are nama mantras. Mm-hmm. So you are given those kind of mantras, and you have higher mantras, like you have the not higher, of course. You have other mantras such as the mantras with the bijaksharas. Then you have purely bijakshara mantras, like the Anakyara in Achyuta Mahapurusha's Sampradaya.
I think the next thing, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, and you've shared a lot of really good information and wisdom, but I would leave it open to, anything that we haven't covered that you think might be of interest to the listener.
Yeah. So this is the Anakyara of the Panchasakha Sampradaya, or Utkaliya Vaishnavism, Odissi Vaishnavism, the various terms used for this line of thought. This is a combination of the different vowel symbols of the Odia alphabet. So in the center you see the vowel O, which is the primary seed vowel, without which no Vyanjana letter can be uttered. Therefore here they'll say that The consonant letters or the Vyanjana Varnas are Shiva, and the Swaraksharas, again this comes from music because we are very concerned about pronunciation and all that sound. And the Swaraksharas are Shakti. No consonant letter can be uttered without a vowel. No Vyanjana can be uttered without a Swara. And Shiva without Shakti is Shava. So that's how they'll take it. So this is the Akara in the center, and they've appended the symbols for Ikara, Ekara, Akara, Ukara and Chandrabindu on top. So it's a composite of all the vowel symbols together, and it's not something that you can pronounce. That is precisely the point. The point is it represents it's like from Sakara to Nirakara, from form to formless. So like from sound to silence, which is what we say from struck sound to unstruck sound. And similarly, this is a letter you can't pronounce. So it represents the primeval sound in that sense. Which is why in the other songs, for example, Shishu Anantadas of the Panchasakha prescribes the Abana mantra. Abana and the other mantras, of which there is again the Hansa is also again another mantra. I was talking about the Hansa the other day. The Hansa or the Swan mantra is just the sound of the breath. So in the songs they'll say Danta Usthana Liba. The teeth and the lips will not move. Sirakanthana Kampiba Danta Usthana Liba. Sirakanthana Kampiba. The head and the vocal cords will not quiver. Mantra jantra nahi tahi dekhiva brahma swarupa. There is no mantra, there is no yantra, yet you will see the Brahma. Okay, so this is, that's why they're saying asadhana sadhana, the sadhana of no sadhana.
Beautiful.
Again, they'll say, so you look at this, no? They're saying, this is again, they're equalizing the macrocosm with the microcosm, which is what we call Pinda Brahmanda Vada. Inside the body are all the worlds. So therefore, the divine is sitting within, and you do not need to look outside. Therefore, without knowledge of the internal deity, there is no use of external ritualistic practice. So external ritualistic practice must lead you to this, otherwise it is pointless. They criticize ritualism in that sense, not that rituals are themselves pointless. Mere rituals are pointless. So again they say, so music. Bajuchi sapata swara, the 7 notes are playing. Subhai kede madhura, so beautiful to listen to. Sesware hoi vibhora, jiva karu thai dhapa, avana akhyara japa, jiva koti janma papa, avana akhyara japa. So the jiva is constantly involved in listening to that sound. So this is something we would learn in our in the Veena tradition. This was a closely guarded secret of South Odisha. So my guru's guru would say that play the strum onto the Veena until you can listen to the Veena within. So the external string, so the body is likened to a Veena, and the Sushumna is likened to a string. So when you can listen to the sound within, the external sound becomes of no use. So for that they would prescribe a sadhana. They would ask them to strum the Veena string, then listen. The strumming will of course persist for a few seconds, say 5 seconds. Then of course the sound never really ends. If you take a recording device, if by the naked ear you can listen for 5 seconds, with a recording device you can listen for 15 seconds if you increase the amplitude of it. It's a very obvious thing. So in the absence of any of these media, they would say just strum it and listen, strum it and listen. If you keep doing that for an hour, gradually you will extend the period. So the point is to meditate on the sound of the strummed string so that you can elongate the precision of your listening, thereby the point being to elongate it to such an extent that the sound never stops, at which point you stop playing because there is no need of it. So it's very much like what they say, and that's basically it. So you'll find this kind of practice in all of the artistic traditions of our state. You will find a similar thing in the Pattachitra tradition as well. But of course, which I've faintly heard of, but because I'm not initiated in that tradition, I can't speak about it. I can only speak about what I've heard. And therefore, this task of documentation and all becomes all the more necessary because these are all specialized streams of traditional knowledge. So unless you are initiated into music and this kind of spiritually initiated into music, the elderly gurus will just consider you unfit to pass on the knowledge. And what do you do to that? You can only hope that somebody goes and does that and qualifies and then collects the song, because otherwise they will not teach the song. There have been instances where I have been asked to sing something out of the ordinary. So if you don't qualify that, which I realized much later, I didn't realize at that point. Because I must have been 17 or 18 when I began talking to these elderly people. So I realized they have a way of knowing who is there for what. And I have heard instances of people who have never cooperated to this sort of an exercise for 50 years, suddenly calling me so that they can give me songs. So this needs to be done for each and everything. Otherwise we are losing the visual tradition, we are losing the stone tradition also at several of these kind of things, the temple building tradition, even the textile tradition for that matter, the solo craft tradition, all of these are in the temple of Puri. There are some 50 traditions like this which have specific times of the year when they are involved in the service. Even the simple, the way the garlands are made in the Puri temple, Pulaguntha Siva. It's a very precisely codified form. There are some 50 types of garlands and 50 types of floral ornaments. And then there has to be no needle. It's obvious, there's no needle. It's only tied. And there's no knot. Not as in proper knot. It's only put within. The flower is entwined within the noose. So even that has its own methodology. Who's there to learn that and codify and document that? And if you go outside Puri, you will find even more local variations within the state, representing different stages of evolution over history. That's why it becomes very, very difficult to, and in the way I see it is, each of these art forms will give you something in the end. And even if you talk with experts or exponents of the various forms, they will all point to the same essential philosophical learning. It's like seeing the same thing from different angles, which ultimately makes your sense clearer of what the object is. In the Panchasakha tradition, Jagannatha's face is itself a yantra. The letters of the alphabet are themselves yantras. It is just like in our lineage, the sound of the 7 notes, sa re ga ma pa da ni sa, this is considered mantra. The sound of sa itself is considered mantra. It's very akin to that tradition that way. This way of thinking comes from the amalgamation, or even better to say this is some sort of antique indigenous belief that was later codified variously by different scholars. That's what happens in the real world. And that's why in the Shunya Samhita of Achyutananda Mahapurusha, you find a mention where they say that we 5 sakhas, friends, together went to the caves where the ancient sages dwelled. So there were sadhakas of previous times, the last century or that century, 100-year-old sages in meditation. So the 5 seers go together and collect all the sadhanas that they are indulging in. Because each of them prescribes a different sadhana. Because each of them has attained the same realization, but through different sadhanas. So they are each propounding the sadhana that they have themselves performed from their first-hand knowledge. So now these 5 young seers, researchers of spiritual methods, have gone just to collect all the methods and just document them, which is so unique. You don't find something of that sort being written anywhere. And they've also written how each of the saints believe that only their way is the way. So some of the saints are like, there is the mystic Sadhaka Bira Singha, who is before Achyuta Mahaprabhu. Writings of Bira Singha are also available. So he says this is not the way, that is not the way, that is not the way, that is not the way. So his way of talking is that. His way of talking is in negatives. So he says that is not the way to attain or realize. This is the worship of idols is not the way to realize. The yoga of Patanjali is not the way to realize. The humming of mantras is not the way to realize. The sitting and meditating is not the way to realize. None of this is knowledge. So what is left is knowledge. Once you exclude all this, the remainder, whatever is left is knowledge. So he is pointing to the fact that you don't need to do any separate sadhana. The body is itself breathing all the time. So the essential breath needs to be focused upon rather than indulging in some external thing which takes you further away from what the body is already doing. You see, in this sense, the body is divine. That it is essentially the same thing that they are saying. The method of expression is different. Right. And a hallmark of saints is that they will try to confuse you in the beginning by these various ways of expression until you are completely dumbfounded and drop all your previous notions of knowledge. So that is that.
I had visions of, maybe going back to Puri someday and, maybe you can point me in the direction of some of these saints. I remember you saying actually that there are some saints, they're ready to share their knowledge to worthy students in Puri. I think you said like in the mountains and more south of Orissa.
Yep, it's very difficult to find them.
Yeah.
They're very secretive. They don't advertise. You see the legacy of the Panchasakha seers even now. The people who are in their lineage of succession do not proclaim, that is those who are in the Mahantik line of lineage and that, except those who are occupying the seats of the important pithas, because they'll obviously be in public image, there's no way around it. The solitary sadhakas are nowhere to be, you can't find them easily, you'll have to go on a wild goose chase to find any one of them. So then they'll take you back to that to find a guru, you must. And their line of thinking is that if somebody has works that hard to reach them, only then he or she is worthy of the knowledge. So which is why they don't advertise their location. It's not like classes from 2 to 4, please enroll. It's never like that. It's never like that, especially in the Panchasakha lineage. If you look outward, it looks as if the whole thing is collapsing. There are no mahantas, there are no sadhus. Because in the times of yore, this was also known. If in one village there is a saint, all the people of the village would go to that saint. And a few of them would become disciples for life. After which word would get out to the neighboring villages saying there is this so-and-so sadhu in so-and-so village. If you look at the system now, that system is entirely collapsed. There is no need of going to the saint in your village. You can have an online session with somebody. You can join an online crash course program of any of the institutions running that. Which is why the indigenous or the local system is collapsed. Once the local system is collapsed, those who indulged in the sadhana will naturally not want to be there. So they've all receded to more isolated locations, which is what people in the earlier times would also do. Unless you have the whole matha thing in a village where there's a spiritual setup, there are 10, 12 people together who maintain the sanctity of that place, why would you want to be there? You would want to be away from a settlement. So that's what they're doing now. So I have heard of a few people who are in the mountains of my district, but you can't do anything. You can't figure out where they are exactly there. That's in itself a lifelong endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no Google Maps.
There's no Google Maps, and the traditionalists will point you out the audacity of trying to build a survey kind of thing for these kind of people.
Yeah, of course, of course. And, even for someone as myself who isn't speaking Odia, I mean, I had a interesting experience going to the ashram of one saint there too, and my driver only spoke Hindi. He didn't speak Odia, and I only spoke English. And the ashram, they primarily spoke Odia. That was enough of a challenge in and of itself that we got lost 3 or 4 times just trying to get there. So yeah, I think I need to brush up on my Odia a little bit more.
As I was talking that day also, we need to translate the basic texts, bring out critical editions with proper transliteration so you can at least follow, and it becomes obvious after a point of time. So there should be because there's nothing of that sort that I know right now. There's no medieval Odia text that is transliterated into English and available with proper annotated English translations. And more so, this being a greater challenge because these texts are hailing from a philosophical tradition and are very difficult to translate. So you'll be forced to use the indigenous terms. And you can't just localize them into the English equivalent. It's much like you use a Jyotish textbook. So much like that. So if this is done systematically and with the guidance of somebody from the philosophical tradition, only then it holds value. Otherwise, a literary translation won't serve anything. And it's also disrespectful towards the text, because it becomes a big question. Even if you are fluent in Odia, you don't understand the underlying layers of the text itself if you are not initiated in the tradition. So there has to be a overseeing body that ensures the texts are not misrepresented or misinterpreted. That's there.
My experience in Jyotish is that the text that I'm studying in Sanskrit, particularly Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra and the Jaimini Upadesha Sutras, they are sufficiently encoded in Sanskrit that unless you're having the Upadesha of the Guru, 90% of it will not make sense. Or, you might think you understand it, but your understanding may only be superficial. You need that Upadesha to unlock some of the deeper. And even still, having the Upadesha, you have to practice, you have to develop, you have to research for that. Jyotish is not just looking at a computer screen. Jyotish is a living video where, we're experiencing planetary influences and energies. So it's very easy just to just let it be stuck in the head, but it's not that. We have to meditate. We have to contact the devata, so that there are sadhanas that accompany that.
When we sing different ragas in the Odissi music tradition, we have something that is very, very unique among the Indian traditions. Before, a raga is a melodic entity. So each raga is visualized as a devata and is invoked in the beginning of singing the song to kindly manifest and be there with us. That is called the dhyana of the raga. Now it is these raga devatas that we are accessing as musicians, that's all. Our group of devatas. It's a different set of energies. So basically that's all. And this I don't know of perhaps it used to be there in the past, but I don't know of any present other in the North Indian classical tradition or in the South Indian classical tradition. I don't know of the raga dhyana being sung, which is why the visual part is given great importance in the Odissi music tradition. So because the dhyana is again painted in the Patachitra style, so that you can look at the picture and then sing. That is the divine image of the melodic form. So in the this is what I say when I say the spiritual heritage of the music tradition. When you are just focused on singing the raga, you don't care about these things. Because in the early 20th century, there have been discourses about it. There have been texts were found from various parts of India, and there have been musicians and scholars who have said that what is the point of this? We are concerned with the melodic form. If there is a say Raga Basanta, if I say the Raga Basanta is a young lad feeding a cuckoo in the forest, some musicians of the time, what is the point of this? I have to sing it. If the scale is a young lad feeding a cuckoo, what do I do with that information? I can't sing that information. So this is all utterly pointless. So this is what I mean, it has become materialistic. Whereas in our tradition, in our Guru Parampara, they are very conscious about that. They always sing the Raga Dhyana in the beginning. And I've asked a lot of elders, they all say that even until the 1940s, it was a universal practice in our state to sing that in the beginning. Even now, the old compositions that have been recorded and all, some lineages still follow it. So, but not all lineages do. So that is the state of affairs. I think only in Assam, apart from Odisha, this tradition has persisted. And in Assam, the tradition of Shankara Deva was it has significant interactions with Odisha. So, and according to the Natya Shastra, it falls under the Odramagadi Pravritti. So, they've also maintained this aspect because they have maintained the spiritual nature of their music. Their music is still now viewed upon as it's traditionally performed in the temples and their namgars. So they're very conscious about preserving that element of the music, which is why this practice is preserved. And I'm sure there will be elements like this in each of the traditions, and sadly many of the traditions themselves have died down. When I say music, I don't think we have the 100% of what used to be there even in the Panchasakha's time. We have I think hardly 10% of whatever the entire repertoire used to be there in their times. And if we can preserve that much, as they would say in Achyuta Mahapurusha Sampradaya, knowledge returns back. If the holder is worthy, the knowledge that has evaporated will re-manifest. It's a very unscientific way of thinking, but it works somehow. It works within the sphere of this artistic and aesthetic tradition. And somehow I feel you're supposed to approach this tradition with that mindset. You can do the analytical and all the mechanical thing, which is also required because today we are living in scientific times. You always need to use the software for the angles of the grahas. You can't omit that part, but in practice you'll have to forget all that.
Yeah.
So the assimilation is the greatest problem of this time. How do you assimilate these seemingly opposing ways of looking at the tradition?
It's very true. It makes a lot of sense. I can't even begin to thank you enough for coming on and sharing with me and just being in your bhav and sharing with the music and just the bhakti coming through. It's such a wonderful experience. And I hope the listeners have gotten a taste of that as well. I'm going to put a link to your website so people can follow I know I follow your Instagram as well, and you post a lot about your visits to temples and different facets of culture as well. I think it's wonderful. So thank you for the seva that you're doing, and thank you for introducing it to a wider audience.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll just end with one note. The tradition that you are involved with, you just mentioned temples, that's why I'm stating this. I, as a musician, have been told to not indulge solely in music because then it gets alienated. You don't see the essential oneness of the tradition across art forms or across different visual, oral, and other multisensory manifestations of the core philosophy. When you indulge in only one form, there's a greater chance of indulging in only the material aspect of it. Because I just said, that painting of the raga. So we are being encouraged to indulge in the Patachitra tradition. just to tell us that, look, this is another expression of what you are trying to do. So perhaps you can find a way from there. So try to listen to the Panchasakha, try to look at paintings, try to visit temples, try to look at the architecture. Old gurus from Puri would say, if you don't eat the traditional food, you can't sing the traditional music, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah, from a very anatomical point of physiological point of view, as well as from this subtle point of view, because this is one cohesive method of expression, and you can do that across the subcultures in India also, but then you will get confused because they will have their own aesthetic. South India has its own aesthetic. The music is according to that, the dance is according to that, the philosophy is also little bit different according to that. The goal might be the same, but you can't say that music and this art. If you do that, then it scatters. So I would encourage everyone to indulge in all aspects of this, because that's what the Panchasakha themselves were doing. Why does Atibadi Jagannatha Das train in music to be a good singer? He was a very good singer. And if you go to the gadis of these Panchasakha, you see Achyutananda Mahapurusha's, the way his eyes are delineated, the way his mouth is done, you see that, no? The painting, so it all hails back to the painting tradition. Why are you being fed why is the painting of the face only according to the local painting tradition? You can say it's a universal painting tradition. But no, it's because it's one way of feeding the knowledge into you. So try to indulge in, if you go into Odia culture, then you have to be full on immersed in it. Otherwise, you won't get much of it or from anything else. So which is why this hyper specialization that used to be there, you specialize in one of the local traditions, but then again you are taught to see the big picture. It's very difficult navigating in Indian tradition.
Well, that's good. Certainly good advice. Okay, well, Prateek ji, thank you for all of your service, and please do check him out. He's such a great. I mean, you've gotten that impression from him, I'm sure, just by watching this video. But
Thank you again.
thank you. Take care.